Hello, welcome. You're listening to Season 3 of Narcolepsy Navigators, brought to you by Naps for Life CIC. Narcolepsy Navigators is a podcast for raising awareness of these fascinating illnesses through a deep dive into the lives and individuals living with narcolepsy, idiopathic hypersomnia, and Klein-Levin syndrome. I'm Kerry Boga, the founder of Naps for Life CIC, and welcome to our stories. Hi everyone, welcome to Narcolepsy Navigators. I'm your host Kerry. I have narcolepsy type 1, and today we're talking with Meg from the USA. Welcome to her story.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. How are you doing?
So far, pretty normal, pretty relaxing.
So Meg, can you tell everybody who you are, what state or town you're living in, your age, if you feel comfortable, and what year you were diagnosed?
Sure. I am from the eastern coast of the United States. Biologically, I'm from South Korea. I was born in South Korea, but came to the United States as an adoptee at 4 months old. Now I am 36 and I live in Maryland, which is near the DC metro area, like Virginia, DC, and Maryland. The city is Frederick. There's a lot of history and it's known for being historical. So that's Frederick's claim to fame. And I have narcolepsy type 1.
And the year you were diagnosed?
Oh, the year that I was diagnosed was 2000, either 10 or 11. And that would have put me at 21 or 22. As far as life before being diagnosed, I feel like there were signs that could have been considered mild symptoms of narcolepsy that my family just chalked up to being my regular disposition or personality. Looking back in hindsight, you could absolutely have attributed those aspects of my personality to symptoms of narcolepsy, specifically the cataplexy, upon being too overwhelmed about things emotionally or just overwhelmed about too much going on around me. I would feel the need to sit down and curl up, just be very closed off to the world around me. A lot of people said, oh, she's antisocial or she's an introvert, when in fact it was just my biological sense to retreat because I knew that something did not feel right physically because of that overstimulation or something too emotional, whether it would be good or bad. I'd fall asleep so easily in a lot of situations that people thought it was cute when I was little, that I was so sleepy and that I liked to take naps, and always made fun of me for falling asleep after being 1 minute in the car ride and just always being sleepy. That I think would definitely have been a sign. But
isn't that a bit interesting? You find that it's endearing in children, yet that same thing doesn't seem endearing if you're an adult.
Absolutely. Also, parents are so frazzled as it is that anytime their child's not making a lot of noise, it's probably wonderful to them. Therefore, a child that naps is great. However, as a child, because our circadian rhythms are all out of sorts, I'm almost nocturnal. When I was little, I was always awake at odd hours of the night. I'd say, Mom, I had a bad dream, which goes into the hypnagogic dreaming. And, oh, Mom, this happened, or there's something really scary. And it was so real. While they got a break during the daytime, they certainly did not get a break in the evening because I was experiencing a lot of nighttime anxiety that I think could be attributed to narcolepsy. That was pretty much life pre-diagnosis.
Before you were diagnosed, what symptoms were you having? And at what point did it get to a situation where you and your parents were like, something's wrong with Meg, this can't be normal?
I was an undergrad studying psychology and I loved it, so interested in it. But I remember I was commuting at the time to save on rent. So I would drive to school, take my classes, drive home, and it was about a 15-minute commute. I remember going to my mother and saying, Mom, look at my notes from this class. And it was a normal psychology. And I found it fascinating. I loved the class. I really liked the teacher. My notes, however, every single line would begin with the sentence or whatever the instructor was saying. And then it would slowly turn into looking very garbled. And then it would just turn into a line that would just drag downwards. And every single line was like that. And I would also have that feeling of starting to fall asleep. And then you just start up and you just realize that you're falling asleep and that you're not supposed to. So you'd sit up quickly. I was doing that, and that probably did not look very good for me as a student in class. And I was just telling my mom, I'm frustrated because that must mean that I'm falling asleep. I like the class. I don't understand. That day, I had to drive 50 minutes to class. And then afterwards, I had to drive the 50 minutes back to my home area, and I had to drive another half an hour past my home to the place where I was working, an hour and 20 minutes. And I was halfway there, and all of a sudden I woke up. There was glass everywhere. I didn't know where I was. Someone had been behind me on the road. I was on a highway, and apparently I was going 70 miles an hour. I flipped my car 3 or 4 times, and then I hit a tree.
Oh my God.
And yeah, they had to cut me out. My arm had gone through my windows. I broke both bones in my forearm. I had glass stuck all over my body, and they didn't know what happened. They had to land a helicopter and fly me to a trauma hospital. It was a very dramatic experience. Their first diagnosis is always seizure. Did she have a seizure? But upon finding out, no, I don't have a seizure disorder, that's when we started toying with the idea of narcolepsy. Since in the United States, it's called an orphan disease, research for it is barely funded. Since there's such a small amount of the population that has it, most people don't even go to that as a possibility. My mom and I were very skeptical about it. So we met with a neurologist, and I did the sleep study. They said that I passed it in flying colors and that it was painful. I said, I never want to do a sleep study like that again because it was painful. I was so grouchy, and it was painful to be woken up every single hour and then have to stay awake until the next nap. They were like, you're absolutely narcoleptic. We didn't put the cataplexy together until maybe a year or two after that, when we started noticing the symptoms. That was how I figured out that I had narcolepsy.
Oh, wow. What was your recovery like from the accident?
It was horrible because I'm left-handed and I broke the bones in my hand.
Oh, no.
So I had to take notes with my right hand.
Oh, wow.
The rest of the semester, I sing classically and supposed to go with my choir to Berlin that summer to travel around and sing. I had saved up $2,000 for it and already given it to them, and I couldn't go because for recovery, I had to take a month off of school. Luckily, it could have been worse in hindsight, but the recovery did require a month off of school. Therefore, I didn't get to go, and that was really sad. I went back to work as soon as possible because I was very budget focused, and I said, as long as I can do my tasks right-handed, I'll do it and I'll be fine. Breaking your bones in your forearm, especially if it's your handedness, is quite inconvenient. And then also people that have narcolepsy usually have problems with their immune system. So it took for me 18 weeks to heal instead of maybe the 12 to 13 that it takes for other people to heal.
How did you feel when you got the diagnosis? How did your mum feel?
It was definitely a mixture of relief, yet devastation. And I don't say devastation lightly. That's exactly how it felt. It was nice to know it wasn't in my head. It was comforting to know that I could identify it with a scientific name. I could do research on it. But it was devastating to know that it was chronic. It was devastating to know that there were only a certain amount of options medically to manage it, not cure it. And it was devastating to understand that now that I knew what it was, I was going to have to adapt my lifestyle to handling it. The fact that you didn't know what your future was going to look like with that illness was terrifying as well. My mother, she's very stoic and very optimistic. Perhaps that's just how she faced me with it, just to be supportive. I'm sure she was scared in her own right, but she was always supportive and saying, oh, they're going to come out with something new, or you have no idea how much better it's going to be in the future. They're going to create things. Hypocretin will absolutely be available to you as you get older. Not to get my hopes up, but just to keep me positive. And that was definitely how we both felt.
Did they take away your license or you keep it?
They did not know what my diagnosis was when the accident happened. They didn't question my license. The DMV in Virginia did not follow up with it. When I got diagnosed with narcolepsy, I asked my medical provider whether I should alert them. They said, as long as you're being treated and use your best judgment of whether you can drive or not, you're okay to go. And I always have used my best judgment. Similarly to if you're inebriated or if you've had anything to drink, it is your decision. At the end of the day, I don't know many people that can measure their blood alcohol level by themselves. So I think most people have to use their better judgment. It's very similar with narcolepsy, where only you know what your limits are. If mine were more severe, I probably would give up my license completely. And, the fact that I'm precautions with medication and have a good handle on it I don't think it warrants losing my license.
I'm glad you got to keep it.
Thank you.
I'm glad you learned beforehand, because I think it might have been a different story. Do you have any comorbidity?
I have an autoimmune illness that's vascular called Behçet syndrome. It's informally known as the Silk Road disease. It's most prevalent in Turkey, but also East Asians can have it. It's extremely rare, and it started flaring up when I was a teen. That is in remission right now. It was very bad from 13 to around to 21. I also have something called CBID, which is common variable immune disease, which means essentially that my body doesn't make white blood cells. Therefore, I don't really have an immune system. I have to stick myself with needles and pump myself full of white blood cells to build up my own immune system, artificially speaking. So that's not very fun. It takes about 4 to 5 hours.
They teach you how to do it, and then you do it yourself.
So at first I had to go in intravenously, and that took about 4 or 5 hours as well. And my father would drive me, and they gave a big pouch of Benadryl intravenously, which makes everybody sleepy. And they would do that first so that you didn't have on the chance that you had an allergic reaction to the serum. So my dad would drive me and sit the whole time while I was laying on a chaise. And I did that. And then they eventually cleared me, my insurance, so that I could do it at my house myself. And I only had one instance where I had a bad reaction and had to use my EpiPen and go to the hospital. Other than that, I can do it by myself and not really worry too much, but it's definitely puts a damper on things, and I have to schedule around it. They look like vials that you get a shot from. I have 3 of them. Those have to be refrigerated at all times. If I want to go on a trip or take it anywhere, I have to make sure that it's on ice. That in itself is an annoyance. I suffer from some mental illness that I could blame on the comorbidities. I have major depression. I have anxiety. I also suffer from bipolar 2 disorder, which is horrible when you look at the connection between that and cataplexy. Those are the comorbidities that...
So what's the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2?
With bipolar 1, during their manic episodes, they have this energy that can be super productive, but they can also make some less than stable decisions that can lead them into trouble. It manifests differently in every individual. Their depressive episodes are super low energy, very sad, just very dark and sad. With bipolar 2, you don't have the manic episodes with the highs and the frenetic energy. You just stay at one level, and it's usually a little bit depressed. If you were looking at the heart monitor and it goes up and down with the line, a regular heartbeat would look like bipolar 1. But for bipolar 2, imagine just downward strokes. We don't have highs. I joked that I wanted to be bipolar 1 because at least I would get some things done and I have more energy. But I have bipolar 2, so I'm unipolar. I'm grateful to just feel semi-okay emotionally most of the time, because the really down times are what get you. They are absolutely immobilizing and can compiled with the other illnesses.
So you got your diagnosis for bipolar after the narcolepsy or before?
The depression and anxiety I got diagnosed with a little before, but the bipolar I actually did not get diagnosed until I was maybe 23 or 24. The medications that I were taking didn't seem to be covering enough ground psychologically. Therefore, we wanted to take a deeper dive into the nuances of my own psychological realm and well-being.
This must make narcolepsy feel worse.
Maybe it does.
I have a friend who got diagnosed with bipolar, and she does have narcolepsy also. She had bipolar 1. And when they first put her on medication, she was saying it was almost like it was being counterproductive, because the narcolepsy needed you to sleep. The bipolar needed you to sleep, but the narcolepsy meds trying to keep you awake, but the bipolar meds want to put you to sleep. They kept crashing each other.
Yeah. definitely depends on whether she is bipolar 1 or 2.
No, she's definitely 1 because she had the manic episodes.
I don't know what manic episodes feel like, but the depression makes it more difficult with the narcolepsy.
It's almost as if you have triple, because I think that everybody who has narcolepsy has some type of depression. It just almost comes with the narcolepsy. It's not something that the doctors talk about so much, and they don't put it on the literature or anything. They see it as like a secondary thing. But to me, it's just as much as you put hypnagogic hallucinations, paralysis, just put it there. Depression, it's a part of it. I don't know why we're keeping it like a secret, and then we should find out later on. Oh, surprise. Yeah. You have depression also.
Yeah.
Because recently the doctor said to me, "Oh, Kelly, are you feeling low?" And I said to her, "No, not any lower than usual." And she goes, "What do you mean?" And I said to her, "I felt like this for years. This is normal." And she said, "No, actually, it's not normal." And I said to her, "Well, I don't know what you're expecting to me to be like super happy, because this is really not possible. I've been living like this for years, and this is what it's like. I know what it's like to drop lower than this, but right now, this is a baseline." And she was like, "No, but you can be better than that. You can be happy." And I was like,
"Tell me how. I'd love to."
"Oh, wow, this is amazing." If she thinks I can be happy, I said to her, I decided to go back to college because if I'm around college and I'm around people, that helps with the depression than if I'm at home and I'm doing remote work. That is what's helping with the depression at the moment. I'd say that I'm at the normal baseline right now, and this is fine for me. I can live like this. Just normally I've been living like this for years. As long as it doesn't dip back down, I wouldn't say that I'm feeling low mood. I'm feeling an average mood for someone with what I have.
That's what I think, whether it's psychiatry or any type of doctor, they have to understand that everyone is at a different baseline. I felt strange that I was depressed and sorry for myself when I got diagnosed. Since I was a psychology major, I started doing research using our database at school that only students studying what I study had access to, so the general public wouldn't. But there was an absolute positive correlation between chronic illness and depression, chronic illness and anxiety. The fact that they don't normalize it and that they don't offer that support right off the bat, say you might want to join this narcolepsy group or you might want to join this chronic illness group. The fact that they don't give you resources and that they keep it on the hush and stigmatize it only makes you feel more alienated and more guilty for wanting to seek out help for that depression. Especially if you're young, especially if you don't have peers that you feel comfortable talking to about it, because narcolepsy is rare enough as it is, make light of it, or they don't put in the time to emotionally understand what you're going through. You don't want to hinder anybody else's life by telling them what you're going through. Even doctors make light of it. What's the secret? Can you write me a prescription for it? We don't wake up and choose to be sad. We're just surviving. I think there's a difference between living and surviving. Some days feel more like survival mode and some feel more like you may have lived a little bit. But I don't think we should feel guilty for that.
How was your experience?
Undergrad, it was after the car crash. It was interesting because it was just learning how to navigate this new diagnosis into my everyday world. When I went to get my master's degree, it was much different. I remember one of the previous interviewees on this podcast was mentioning how at lunchtime she keeps her yoga mat and takes a little nap. In undergrad, the sleepiest times would be when my classes were. Since I can't sleep very well at night for my master's, they're all evening classes. I would have random jolts of energy during those evening classes where I could actually get through them all right. I think it depends on what stage of education you are at. Online classes were harder for me than in-person classes during the pandemic. It was much easier for me to fall asleep looking at a screen. In class, I have an image to keep up. I have to portray myself in a very professional manner and everybody's looking at me. But when you're sitting there with a sweater and nice blouse and the pajama bottoms on, it's very easy to get comfortable and sleepy. It depends somewhat on your educational experiences, but those were mine.
I think it's interesting what you said about night classes. I wonder if in the future there will be something where maybe not for masters, but for an earlier stage of education, choose your classes. If they did classes twice, day and night, you got to choose which to go to. someone who had narcolepsy could choose the night classes, sleep in the day and then more awake at night because that would be more convenient for them.
I would love that. But at least in the US, for undergrad, it's always during the early morning to afternoon. And the latest the classes will go is like 4 p.m. Those ones are very difficult for me because that was prime sleepy time. Anywhere from 1 to 4, even 5 maybe, was very sleepy time. And I would sleep in my car a lot in between classes in undergrad since I commuted. If I was tired, I didn't have a yoga mat, and it would have been awkward if I did that in the library or something like that. But I would just crawl into the backseat of my car. I still keep blankets and pillows in my car because I never know when I'm going to need a nap. In between classes, I sleep and try to feel somewhat refreshed by the time I have my next class. But that's another good sneaky way of getting some sleep in.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, unless you're one of those epileptics that when you go to sleep, you sleep hard and it's difficult to get back at. Sometimes when my alarm would go off, I'd go to class angry as hell. I was just crabby. And
didn't it feel as if you just fell asleep and then you look at the clock like, no, it wasn't half an hour?
Absolutely. You're just like, no, this can't be right. I'm a crabby person. If I get woken up at the wrong, I never know if I'm going to do a heavy sleep or if I'm going to be able to do a nap. It's the luck of the draw.
Interestingly enough, even though the doctors like to tell us that we're only supposed to have half an hour naps, I find when you listen to your body and you wait, the body wakes up when it's ready, you feel the best after that nap.
Absolutely. I know that everybody perceives time differently. It usually takes about 8 minutes for someone to fall fast asleep, but 30 minutes to me, that's just getting warmed up. If it works for some people, wonderful. I've slept 17 hours straight. No restroom breaks, no food, just asleep. I let myself do that whenever I can. That's fine. Our brains are technically damaged because of things that we're missing. And if sleep is something that revitalizes us, not as much as it does normal people without narcolepsy, then I'm going to get as much sleep as I can so I can maybe mend it a little more than usual. I don't really know what my brain looks like because of the narcolepsy, but I'd like to keep it as healthy as possible with the sleep.
Yeah, I agree. So what advocacy work have you done in the past or are you doing now?
Try to create as much awareness of chronic illness in general. By chance, that's how you found me because of, I think, probably my hashtags or something along those lines. But it's not necessarily, I don't even know if it would be considered advocacy because I try to create awareness.
And even advocacy in your own life is also important, even if it's not to the general public, but advocating for yourself through maybe even through your family.
It's actually easier for me to keep some distance between the narcolepsy and my personal life than it is for me to publicly make awareness of it. For some reason, maybe it differs amongst everybody, but there's a question about family or how you perceive family and things like that. For some reason, it's easier for me to approach it from I'm just trying to advocate for us amongst strangers and possible other narcoleptics that feel the pain. I've met so many narcoleptics through hashtags on Instagram that I speak to on a regular basis. And that in itself is so validating because they feel more like family sometimes, my own siblings. I don't have to constantly remind or explain like today's a bad day because of my narcolepsy. And it's not just narcolepsy, any of the other comorbidities that I was mentioning. I find people through there as well. And you just know, you can sit with that person and they just know. You don't feel like you have to explain anything. It is very easy to feel you need to make excuses for yourself and your behavior because of the narcolepsy. And that's just another thing that needs to be completely obliterated because it's not something we should ever have to feel like we need to excuse ourselves or apologize for.
What do you have lined up for the future?
As far as vocationally, my master's degree, I'm not quite sure if I would like to pursue vocation around that. I think I would like to go back to school and get another master's in forensic psychology, hopefully get some kind of law enforcement job, contracting for law enforcement, or even working for the government federally, speaking, I'd like to possibly do something in that area. Quite honestly, when you find out that you have narcolepsy, at least for me, was I had to, I don't want to say lower my expectations, but I had to be a little more practical and realistic with the things I was going to pursue in my life. Part of what was so devastating, because I had to realize they tell you when you're a kid, you can do whatever you want with your life, be whoever you want. And I just felt like this is so unfair. Why me? Why do my siblings get to be normal? How come I have to now worry about this and make every decision based off of, can I do it because of this? Will the narcolepsy allow me to do this? It's easy to let it start to control you and your decisions in an unhealthy way where you feel enslaved to this diagnosis. You just feel like it's out of my hands. I should feel anxious and depressed because you feel like the narcolepsy owns my soul now. It determines what I do. Once you learn to practice acceptance and bargain with yourself, you can still find ways to make your life fulfilling. So I hope that I can do this, but it keeps you on your toes, because if something doesn't work out, I have to have some backup ideas, not expect failure, but expect the fact that you might have to reroute your future. And I like putting it that way because it's not saying that things are failures per se. It's just saying it wasn't right for you and your specific diagnosis, medical disposition. So I like to keep my options open and find a permanent vocation that I can do alongside with doing narcolepsy in my life. I don't say that in a negative light whatsoever, but it is the best that you can do.
Just keeping being realistic.
Yeah, which to some people without any chronic illnesses probably think, oh my gosh, that sounds so fatalistic, so depressing. Why are you so negative? And I'm like, no, this is my reality. The things I'm saying aren't negative. They're not a walk in the park. Nothing's a walk in the park for me. But at the same time, this is my reality. Just like your doctor who was like, I don't understand. Why can't you be happy? It's just, no, I am just working with this as my reality. Sorry if it's depressing to you. Imagine how I feel because I'm the one living through it. I'm sorry that I'm depressing you by just describing certain things, but imagine what it's like to be the owner of those things and them to be running through your mind 24/7 and having to combat that in itself is tiring. Being positive is tiring sometimes. Just having a positive mindset as far as people's future, especially as young adults, that's a big one. Just keeping all your options open and understanding that if one door closes, another one opens. The biggest thing, I think.
When I'm in my 20s, early 30s, I get this fancy idea of some job that I should apply for. Obviously, I would never do that now. Like, it's not realistic. I wasn't being realistic of narcolepsy. I would just apply for it. So I applied to be an air hostess. Because of course, you can be sleepy and be up in the air, walking up and down. The time changes every city and town. Anyway, didn't get through with that. 1 year, I applied to be a prison officer. This got my sisters in chuckles because they were like, yes, Kelly, we can't wait for you to go to this interview and then explain you have narcolepsy. And then you fall asleep and then the prisoners pickpocket you and they become loose. This is the stuff they would say to me. I'll just go online and apply. I even applied for lessons to be a private detective. Every so often, my brain would just go crazy. And I think, yeah, guess what, narcolepsy? I can do this, but I don't do that. Now I'm very realistic about stuff.
Yeah, it's a learning process. And like I said, I think acceptance plays a lot into that. And when you're younger, I don't know about you, but I feel we age at a different rate than people without narcolepsy.
No, definitely.
My whole body, because of my brain, I feel like my father, who's turning 79 this year, is in better mental and physical health than I am.
I agree with that.
If I was a car, it doesn't matter what make or model and year you are. What matters is the miles that were put on it at what time. I might only be 36, but I feel like I have the mileage of a car that's been driven 180,000 miles. And then there could be a really old car that was only driven 5,000 miles.
Yeah.
And the mileage that gets put on your body that determines your state of mind and the age you actually feel. And my siblings know nothing about this. I feel like an old granny that needs to be in a rocking chair saying, when I was your age, I remember, because I don't feel like I'm in the same ballpark as them.
What are your vivid dreams, your vivid dream life like?
My hypnagogic dreaming, I didn't know that was a thing, obviously, because doctors forget to tell you lots of things. I've been having those since I was tiny, and we thought they were night terrors. I was also sleepwalking, but I didn't start getting them badly until my early 20s. They were so jarring because they were so real. I would have to talk to someone immediately after, like my mother or my partner, to distinguish whether it was real or not. And the people that were in the dreams, I would have to verify. I just felt like I needed somebody to reorient me and say, no, that was a dream. My partner now, when I'm sleeping, I will say and do a lot of things when I'm coming out of it. I sang the whole happy birthday song as if I was awake. And it scared the hell out of me. So I literally was like, happy birthday to you. And the person whose birthday it was died right after that. And I started crying. I feel so bad for my partner because he must think that you do feel a little crazy sometimes. And then I'd start crying and I'd say, well, I can speak as clearly as if I'm awake. I don't move so much, get so emotional and loud and not sure what's reality, what's not reality. It's just very disconcerting because there are happy moments, but there's always these horrible things happening that are really messed up. I'll tell my dreams to whoever was in it, and I probably shouldn't do that. But then you died because this happened, and I'll wake up crying. It's emotionally taxing in so many ways because people I love have died over and over. I can smell, I can taste, I feel. I have all my senses, and people don't get that. They don't understand. I'm like, no, I can feel the textures. I can smell the blood.
And that's what makes it so traumatic. It's because your senses are 100% while it's happening.
Yeah. I'm like, I can feel textures. I can smell blood. I can get hurt. I have pain. And that in itself is exhausting. That's part of the reason why we're so tired, because we're like alive 24/7. We don't get to rest. And quite frankly, our nighttime sleep isn't always much of an escape because it's this scary side of life, like a Netflix horror show. What's it going to be tonight? Apologize to your family and friends before you go to sleep because they're probably going to call them frantic in the morning. My poor partner is traumatized because I've traumatized him. I will do a lot of things. I'll eat my sleep. I will do certain things in my sleep. It's an experience for both the person dreaming and anyone around them when it happens.
A lot of those symptoms that you're describing is also a part of, if you have REM behavioral disorder, it's another sleeping disorder. I have it. It causes you to like sleepwalk, act out your dreams, sleep eat.
My bones feel so old. I'm just going to prop myself up on the wall here.
It wasn't until recently that I realized that the physical pain I was feeling was also coming from the narcolepsy.
Really?
I started to talk to other people and they were saying, you ever feel in your bones like your whole body feels weak? Tired weakness in the bones. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, yeah, it's happening to me too.
What? That would make a lot of sense because it doesn't feel, when I say that, people are, oh, are you having a cataplexy? I'm like, no, it's not cataplexy. It's literally, I'll tell my coworker, old bones. I always call it old bones. And they'll say, you're only 36. And that's why I brought up the whole, you feel like a car that's been driven way too much. And maybe nobody's checked your oil or pumped up your tires in a long time. And you've been neglected, but you've been used a lot. And that's how I try and tell them that, at least for like the Behçet's and the CBID, the autoimmune diseases, usually we end up having rheumatoid arthritis anyway, as like a byproduct. I already have scoliosis too, like just mildly. So every once in a while, my back will act up and I won't be able to go to work for a few days or something like that. And told my mom, I was like, it's every single group, like my brain, my body, every single, I don't know, bodily group was like, I'm going to have some kind of malfunction clear up. And I'm just like, can't it just be one thing? Like I'd take one thing chronically, that's fine. But I can't do all these things chronically. There's too much. I don't understand how I'm supposed to fit in a normal life with these other things that I need to take care of, which is similar to the whole, if you want to have kids and things like that, particularly as a female at 36 years old, everyone's like, oh, your clock is ticking. I'm like, first of all, I feel like we are way past that in society. So can we just ditch that whole patriarchal way of thinking and just assuming that because I have female anatomy and I menstruate, that my sole purpose in life is to contribute to society by creating offspring? No, I think that there are other people who are going to do that. I don't think that I necessarily have to take on that as well. Some people would look at parenting as taking on another chronic illness. I don't know. I'm just saying that sometimes people, I think it's romanticized too much. And the hard parts aren't really broadcasted quite enough about having children. And I know a lot of very spunky, energetic people struggle to keep up with their children. On a pragmatic level, I'm like, oh, good Lord, I would never be able to do that. I'm trying to have nap time over here. And then imagining a screaming little tyke, I'd look like a horrible mother because I'd be like, just scream it out. I'm going to take my nap. And so it's all relative. We wouldn't be horrible people, horrible mothers, but we'd just be trying to survive. And so it doesn't make us horrible people for not necessarily wanting to rear children, but it's similar to being practical about what your life is going to look like during your diagnosis, because maybe some people can muster up the energy or have a different level of severity of narcolepsy and it works for them, or they have a partner that can give enough of themselves to help that out. But not everybody has those resources and that ability. And so that is fine, but I don't let people tell me that the value of my life is based off of leaving some sort of legacy behind or spreading my family's name or however you want to look at it. I don't think that's the only way you can contribute or leave it. I feel like you can leave just as many important things behind, whether it's research, anything you do, you can absolutely be a contributor to your world, your society, just your people around you and your support system. As far as the marriage and children, marriage would be nice. I think that goes in general, everybody's so personal about how they feel about marriage. And then adding the disorders or the comorbidities, in my case, pretty much, I'm pretty open with people that I'm letting into my life in that capacity intimately. And I don't see the point in hiding at this point because I just don't. And so when I date someone, I let them know right off the bat, listen, here's my rap sheet. If you don't like which, then scram. Because I just don't have time or energy to put up this fake identity when this is a reality. And if it's too much or if it's not something that you're interested in, then just better off for both of us. So that's how and then as far as marriage goes, I could take it or leave it quite honestly, because everybody has different reasons for wanting marriage. From a practical standpoint, I always want to be able to make sure that I can take care of myself with my own resources. That's why the future is so important for me, vocationally speaking. I don't want to have to depend on somebody else for my well-being. It's nice to have that as an option and whatnot, but ultimately, marriage is really not of as much importance to me as a lot of other social constructs in my life. And then the whole thing with children, I have to be honest with myself about what I'm capable of doing, as well as the whole biological versus adoption aspect of things. Knowing the things that I know about my body, and then knowing that I could possibly birth a little child that would one day battle those same things. It's heartbreaking. And granted, yes, there's a chance that they wouldn't be affected, but I feel like at some point, at least for me, everybody has the right to do whatever they'd like. But for me, I would feel very guilty if I created life knowing that there'd be chances like that. I just would, even if I had the resource to take care of that.
They always know that it came from you, that you were the culprit, that you caused it.
Exactly. And then the odd thing about the adoption that I told my mom, and I always talk about it and it cracks up. I say, probably shouldn't. That's another thing, is we have just morbid senses of humor because of all the illnesses. But we always joke around that, like, when you adopt a baby, unless they did a good job at the hospital of getting the information from the biological parents or parent, it was just my biological mother. I don't know who my father biologically was, but if they don't do good homework on that, then pretty much anything is game. So your whole life, it's just like a surprise. It's like a jack in the box diagnosis because we didn't know you don't have anything to base it off of. I don't know any family medical history. So it's like shooting in the dark. With my other 4 sisters, they're all adopted as well. And we're not biologically related. We're all from different families biologically. So it's pretty much just been like, okay, we'll just wait and see what comes up. And for me, I won the lottery, but my poor mother and father, there's no way of telling her. It's nice to know a lot of things about your biological family. But as far as biologically, it's nice to know, oh, heart disease, liver disease, or any type of thing. That's nice to know, because I told my mom, what if I have a kid and there's other propensities in my body that skip generations that I didn't have? And then I give it like 10 things, because everything skips generations, it seems. Yeah. I would feel horrible if they got like all of mine plus some. And then I'd be like, sorry, it's because mommy didn't know what she has going on. And maybe by that time, they'll be able to take a drop of your blood or your hair and be like, oh, you have all these things. Maybe. But until then, I would feel horrible if my poor little kid was suffering from all these things. Yep. And yeah, that's another aspect of parenthood that you just have to face and be very honest with yourself about. If I biologically have this baby, here's what could happen. Am I prepared for that? Can I deal with that? And what's that going to look like for the baby and for me? And is it sustainable? Because the last thing I'd want is to not be able to fulfill my motherly duties and, God forbid, either give up my child or have to find some alternate living arrangement for the babies. Yeah, I just think, no offense, but I feel any parent should probably have those thoughts.
Yeah, they should.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people that don't. And then you're like, oh, okay. But especially, I think, for people that have health issues like that chronically.
As someone of East Asian descent, do you think cultural factors have influenced your experience or perspective?
So I do, being a international adoptee and not necessarily having been raised in a family that is of East Asian descent, there's still cultural factors, interestingly enough, that match up with East Asian upbringing. My mother and father actually have very similar dynamics, East Asian household, for reasons that it would take too long to discuss. But as far as how it manifests itself in my experience with narcolepsy or perception, my father is very, if he can't see it or if he doesn't understand it, then it's not necessarily real. And even if it is, you just deal with it, coming from the perspective of, I had to deal with so much worse when I was little, and therefore you don't understand how good you have it. And then my mother is definitely what colloquially people would call tiger moms. And so very traditionally East Asian acting in her mannerisms, expectations, and discipline, as well as controlling manner. And it's funny because my partner is Taiwanese, and he says my mother is more of a tiger mom than his mother. And so at first, I think my mom was not disappointed in me, but I think she was hoping that I would advance or grow out of some of these comorbidities, including narcolepsy. And she was having a hard time believing the doctors and believing what she was being told. So she wanted to do a lot. And I think that's part of the control thing. I think that's part of the aspect that I'm the mother. I know what's best for my child over anybody. So you can't tell me that. And so while she still respected science, research, and whatnot, she would do her own research in the respect of homeopathy. That's very big in Asian cultures. And my mom is extremely homeopathic. And if she can find something natural and use that instead, then she would absolutely rather use that than something that's been synthesized or made in a lab. And so she always goes by natural things first as her first treatment level. And then if we need the big guns to bring those in, then she'll say, okay, let's get a prescription for that. And then as time has gone on, my dad has changed his tune, and he's softened up to the fact that, oh, okay, even though I can't see this, it feels like this. My mother's pretty much stayed very consistent and now has no problem with accepting, okay, medications are out now. What can you take weight kicks? Can you take that? And I think that it's a learning curve for everybody. And that's just how I would say it was perceived through actually being East Asian. I don't know what it is. We learned a lot of things that Behçet is very prevalent with East Asians. Narcolepsy is very prevalent with East Asians. And so doing a lot of research about culturally what your possible medical roots are going to look like is very important as well, because I'm an implant. I'm not from here per se. That's very important that the parents try to understand as much as they can in order to advocate and protect you. And that was definitely my experience with being East Asian and then my parents' type of rearing.
So it's quite interesting that they took on, especially your mom, like your partner saying that your mom is more a tiger mom than his mom, that she took on that type of parenting role.
Absolutely. She did. And it's because it's very personality related with my mother, and her expectations were extremely high for all my siblings and I. And we were always playing classical instruments, constantly doing a bunch of different activities. School was very important. Discipline was extremely, let's just say, there's a lot of discipline in my household and structure, a lot of structure. And so in that respect, a lot of my friends, gosh, all through my life have called my mom a tiger mom, because they're always like, wow, your mom is so disciplined about this and this. And then there's the whole homeopathic where she was always trying to get herbs and things to help us. And my partner's mom is like that too. If my back is sore, she'll be like, use tiger balm, use this. And so that's where a lot of those parallels are, is that they're very concerned with the well-being and the expectations are very high. And so in that East Asian context, and I'm going to include my mother on that just due to her disposition, there's another thing that you have to deal with when you get diagnosed, and it's that you don't want to feel like you're letting people down. If you were raised in a household with those expectations, wanting to make them proud, wanting to honor your family's name, almost for me, because I love being a McKinney. When I found out, I still strained to do everything that I could so that they'd be proud of me. So nothing would, in my head, I tried to trick myself into thinking, you can beat this. It's not going to define you. You can choose whether you're going to excel or not. Like, just try harder. And I would just beat myself up. Granted, my parents weren't putting pressure on me. I was doing it to myself because I was raised to be
That way.
Yeah. So then I felt like I was just falling short as an individual, and I was a disappointment and all these things that no one ever said to me, but I just psychologically felt because of the way I was brought up. I was just like, no, you can't accept this. This is not you. And so part of that, like I said, is acceptance and not feeling like you're just constantly failing and not living up to what your potential is. And it's not even that you have to lower your bar for performance or potential. It's that you just have to tweak it, make it look different. It's just going to be a little different than it was before. But nobody really tells you that when you get diagnosed. So you just go through this horrible stage of feeling like, oh my God, I'm a failure because I can't do anything like I used to. And so my parents don't realize that's how I felt. And they don't, but they just did put a lot of pressure on us to be successful, to have multiple hobbies at one time, to be good in school, all those things. And then once you come to the realization that you can't do them anymore, you feel like apologizing to them and that you let them down. And that's a pretty crappy feeling. And I think that goes into what it was like in the household and in that background, and how the narcolepsy and other things definitely influence them.
What advice would you give to others who are navigating similar challenges, either with issues with identity and adoption?
Okay, so I have multiple points for as far as the identity goes, I would say don't be too proud to admit that you need help in your life. Just never be too proud. Pride is definitely a big thing. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, whether it's with friends, teachers, bosses, or family. It doesn't matter who, what, or where. When you should always feel that you have the ability to advocate for yourself. Don't let the fear take over, anything like that. And admit that accommodations don't equate to weakness. It's just simply adjusting to leading a new, let's say, quote, healthy lifestyle. And with that, comes, don't compare your success and things that don't work out with others in your life specifically, because usually that's your best baseline. We don't compare ourselves to movie stars and things like that. We compare ourselves to what we can see and interact with on a daily basis. Just like your siblings or anything like that, you don't compare yourself to them or your success to them. Nobody knows everybody's story. So there's no reason to compare yourself to that. Also, like I said, there are a lot of things that you can do to practice acceptance, but I think acceptance and being open to new physical developments and changes despite not knowing any hereditary propensities, that goes for adoption as well as just anyone in general, because not everybody knows their family health history. Just practicing that whatever comes my way, I'm going to deal with it and it's going to be okay. Just practicing that will ease the anxiety and possibly even depression. And then lastly, as far as identity goes, adoption itself, domestic or international, like me, it's already difficult enough. There's actually a high suicide rate amongst adoptees. So it's difficult enough physically and mentally to navigate individually and interpersonally, whether it's your partner, your family, or your friends. But don't let your illness or your illnesses identify you or define you at all. Don't let narcolepsy be who you are. You have narcolepsy. Narcolepsy is not you. Define you. You're not your illness. And psychologically speaking, as an adoptee, usually we have problems with attachment disorders and styles. Also, for just any person that's not adopted, make sure that your support system, the people that advocate for you, make sure that the connection and attachment to them is healthy and that the emotional hygiene of that attachment is healthy and secure. Because a lot of people that are just physically a little more vulnerable, let's say, than others, specifically with narcolepsy, will lean on people, and you can get into some kind of sticky situations where you feel dependent on people that aren't necessarily the best bonds for you. And people feel sometimes that they need to settle for certain friends or for certain partners because they're afraid they won't get the assistance that they need at all, or they're afraid of going through a gap of time where they don't have assistance. But I just want to stress the importance of making sure that you didn't settle on a support group or advocates that just aren't up to par because you're afraid of not getting the help that you need, because you can get the help that you need through healthy resources and support systems. And you should not feel the need to rely on people that are subpar just so that you can survive. There are really healthy resources out there. So I just wanted to stress that, because I do know some people that do feel like I couldn't survive without them, or I need them. But no, you actually need somebody that treats you better, that sees your worth and knows your worth and doesn't make you feel guilty or like you owe them anything because they're helping you. So just as a psychological PSA, I just want people to know that they're worth so much more than I think a lot of people that are ill feel they are, and that you should still know your worth, and that it shouldn't lessen just because you have narcolepsy. And if anything, you should hold your advocates and your loved ones to higher standards than before, because they need to know how to be a good advocate, and that's what you deserve. So that's really the final thing I wanted to touch on.
So now for the special question. If there was a red button and you could press the red button and get rid of narcolepsy, would you press it? And why?
To get rid of it
Completely.
I feel like this is a trick question. I think there'd be consequences.
There's no consequences.
I don't know any narcoleptic that wouldn't want to press the red button.
Yeah, we've had a few.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
But I think it also might depend on the day that you catch the person. Had a really bad day and someone asks you this question, you might just say yes because you're just having a really crap day or a crap week or whatever. So I answered no to this question when I was asked, because that week I was doing well. Now, if someone had asked me this last week when I was sleeping 12 hours a day, I would have said yes. So it depends on the day.
Oh, okay.
I just felt because of the friends that I've gained, the way that it's changed my life, that's what I said. But if you had asked me last week when I was sleeping 12 hours and I couldn't really get out of bed and I couldn't really do anything more than 2 hours of the day, that was actually something of actually accomplishing, saying, oh yeah, what did you accomplish today, Kelly? I probably only did 2 hours of something worth accomplishing. So you'd asked me last week, I would have said yes.
Okay, that makes so much sense to me. I would not have even met you if I didn't have narcolepsy. And yeah, that's very true. But I'm going to say this just for myself. I feel like I have a lot of other areas too that I can advocate for because of the comorbidities. So I'm not saying I don't care about my narcoleptic friends, but if that button was there, probably do that so I'd have one less thing to advocate for, just because that's just me. But when you look at it that way, yes, you do gain. I would be sad that I wouldn't have gained all the insight and the connections and support that I have. But that's a tricky one. That's a tricky one because it's a lot of suffering too. Yeah, maybe you're right. It depends on the day. Today, I would say that I would press the button. Now I feel guilty.
No, you don't have to feel guilty. I had someone on and I loved her answer. She was like, she would press it, definitely. She wants to get rid of it because she doesn't feel that everything that she gained and learned from having it would only, by pressing it and no longer having it, mean that it would have got rid of all those things that she gained. And so she would still be a great advocate and a great person from all the lessons that she learned from having it. It's just that she wouldn't have narcolepsy anymore, but all those things that she learned, she would still be able to use those things in her life going forward.
Oh, I didn't know you're allowed to keep them. Then yeah, I would
Never thought of that when she said it because I didn't think of that either. And I thought, oh, that's so clever. You can get rid of it and keep your stuff.
I didn't know if it erased who I was before with narcolepsy.
Me either, but I love the way that she interpreted the question. And I thought, that's so clever.
Yeah, that to say I knew what it was like. But then you would feel bad because people would be like, how did you get fixed? And it was a miracle? I don't know. But yeah, that is a good answer. But I would feel bad that I couldn't help other people. Definitely.
I think when I was first asked a question, I just thought of it like someone asking someone who was blind if they wanted sight. But as you've lived your whole life blind and this is your whole identity, maybe I wouldn't say that it's not important for you to have sight, but that's all you know. So you've already accomplished all your things in your life and you're navigating life anyway. I did hear someone say once, I think it was a Christian composer. She wrote songs and she was asked if she won her sight back, but she wasn't born blind. She had sight before and then she got illness and that made her blind. And when they asked her, she said, no, actually she'd wait until the first person she saw was Jesus. She'd rather wait until she got to heaven and then have her sight back, have it on earth.
That's an interesting one coming from someone that lost their sight.
Meg, thank you for coming on Navigators and sharing a bit of your story with us. It was really nice to hear about your story and the challenges and your hopes and dreams for the future.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Cool. We usually say happy napping at the end. So bye, everyone, and happy napping. Views and opinions in these stories may not work for everyone. If anything you have heard is relatable, please see a doctor for advice. Narcolepsy Navigators is produced by a team of volunteers working for the Naps for Life CIC, which is a non-profit group dedicated to improving the lives of people with sleep disorders through community action. You can help grow our podcast and join our sleep disorder support group by visiting the website www.napsforlife.com. If you or someone you know has a sleep disorder and would like to share your story on Narcolepsy Navigators, please email us at narcolepsynavigators@gmail.com. You can also support us by donating at the website. Happy napping, everyone.